The National Development Strategy, NDS1, identifies domestic resource mobilization as a key financing alternative for Vision 2030. Indeed, domestic resource mobilization is potentially the biggest source of long-term financing for sustainable development, given the fact that the country is endowed with many natural and mineral resources. It gives the government better control and flexibility in enhancing national ownership over development processes. Be that as it may, it is also important to borrow in order to work on much bigger projects, especially infrastructure development. So debt management cannot be avoided. Hello and welcome to Economic Forum, where we discuss various issues affecting our economy in Zimbabwe. These can be issues to do with agriculture, with tourism, with education, manufacturing, and many other facets of life. We discuss them here in order to see how they affect our economy. And today, as you have already heard, we are going to be talking about debt management. How do we manage our debt as a country? Even as individuals, we do require debt at some point in time. But today, we are focusing on national debt, how we can manage it. And today, we are excited to be hosting Vivian Zama, who is a debt analyst. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me on the program.
Yes, the first thing is, what is debt? Do we all understand debt?
Yeah, so debt, this is the sum of repayments. Repayments, be it to creditors, both at bilateral or multilateral. That can be paid in cash. It can also be paid by goods. But let me reiterate that anyone, be it individuals or countries, can have debt.
So at a government level, maybe you want to explain how we end up accumulating debt as a country.
The debt history dates back to when we got independence, but I'm not going to center much on that. But I know that mostly the debt that we have accumulated was directed to bigger projects that we are doing in terms of infrastructure. And the debt, of course, yeah, it's big. And as we are going to be discussing, the amount that we owe to who, be it both domestic and foreign debt.
And how is it managed? I know we see agreements being signed that such an organization is going to give us so much money, or that there is the COVID-19, we also need some money to arrest it, and any other projects, including infrastructure development, although we did mention at the beginning of the program that we also try as much as possible to use our own resources.
Yes, domestic resource mobilization is very important, and it is advisable that countries must rely on the resources that they have in terms of building their infrastructure, in terms of supporting their budgets, in terms of doing capital projects, so that we move forward. For Zimbabwe, of course, yeah, we have quite a number of minerals that we have. We have the capacity, to raise money of our own in terms of doing roads, in terms of building bridges, and in terms of also supporting the budget. But I'm telling you, debt, we cannot run away from it, because we need to have liquidity in our economy. We need also to sponsor those projects that also build our life and make sure we achieve the Vision 2030 that we are looking forward to.
Mm-hmm. So, what kind of projects are really composed in most of the debt stock that you're talking about?
Mostly, issues around road rehabilitation, issues around, supporting capital projects that we have, building of bridges, rapid response units. Like during the time of, disasters, we always, rely on our, friends to give us the much needed resources so that we can be able to finance those particular issues.
Yes. So, what is the debt stock that we have at the moment? Just an overview, you've just mentioned some of the projects, but what is the stock like?
In terms of our debt stock, the public and publicly guaranteed debt, it's standing at a staggering 21.2 billion. And of that 21.2 billion, 13 billion is external debt, and the 8.1 billion is domestic debt. So let me demarcate a bit. In terms of domestic debt, we are talking about the RBZ debt, we are talking about the debt that we have from white commercial farmers, the 3 billion that we are supposed to repay them in terms of the developments that they've done on those farms. In terms of external debt, the most interesting thing is that on the 13 billion, 77.7% of it are from arrears, penalties. They just imagine 77.7, we are looking at about 10, something like 10 billion from penalties only. Our debt maybe it's 3 billion in terms of the actual.
Now, as someone who sometimes engages the authorities at various fora, is it explained why we have some of these penalties? Because even at individual level, if you don't pay your debt, you are penalized.
Yeah, so for Zimbabwe, information is out there. There is a bit of improved transparency and accountability in terms of our debt stock. And the recently
It's in the public domain.
Yes, the Minister of Finance and the Public Debt Management Office, they produced the 2024 Public Debt Bulletin, which chronicles the position our country has in terms of debt, the position in terms of why we sometimes fail to meet our obligations and end up being in arrears and also being penalized for non-payment. So in terms of that, I commend that the government is doing well for the public to know where we stand in terms of public debt.
Maybe like someone who read the full document, you can share with the viewers some of the reasons that were given by this institution of government regards why we are not up to date.
The general performance of our economy, in terms of inflation. Remember, our debt is denominated in foreign currency, which is the green currency, the US dollar, against our own currency. So in terms of repayment, you tend to find that if interests are done in US dollar, that is a hard currency. That sometimes we then fail to meet these obligations. Yeah.
That's Vivian Tashinga Zamba. He's a debt analyst and he's telling us about what debt is, as well as the current stock that we have and how that debt is managed and the necessity of actually having it. So join us in the second segment of Economic Forum. We are now in the second segment of Economic Forum, where we are discussing debt management with the debt analyst here, who is Vivian Tashinga Zamba. Now, we were discussing previously why we accumulate debt, and one thing that we emphasized is that the debt may not be too huge, but what happens is that if we falter in repayments, we are then penalized, and then it accumulates. And which is something probably we'll discuss when we're discussing the budget regarding how that can be avoided. But let's go on to discuss that besides debt, how else can we raise funds? As we talked about our minerals earlier on, as we talked about our natural resources, maybe other ways of raising funds.
Yes, so other ways includes like the point that we have made in earlier, domestic resource mobilization. We have quite a number of minerals that we have. The thing is just to value add them and make sure that we repay our debt. And the issue of resource-backed loans, it's also important that we use our minerals to repay debt. But it needs to be treated with caution, because sometimes when you make commitments to exchange, to pay or repay debt with minerals, we are always at the receiving end as countries in debt, and the debtors, the creditors, will always be at a profit when we mortgage our resources on debt. So we should try by almost to reduce those resource-backed loans to make sure that we repay debt. Another thing is to up our game in terms of taxation, but also making sure that the taxation is not regressive and it doesn't choke the ordinary citizens. We need to make sure that Our borders are strong to make sure that people pay their taxes, prescribed taxes at law. We also need to fight corruption, to make sure that we plug in illicit financial flows, we reduce by all means necessary leakage of this money in terms of our economy. But let me hasten to say that it's not Zimbabwe alone that is owing to creditors. If I can look in SADC, the SADC law in terms of debt prescribes countries to say that their debt must not exceed 60% of their GDP. Their GDP to debt ratio must not exceed 60%. Angola right now is at 88%. South Africa is 71.4%.
For various reasons.
For various reasons. Zimbabwe is above 96% of the GDP. And if you could go back to our laws again, the Public Debt Management Act, it says the GDP to debt ratio must not exceed 70% of our GDP. The debt must not exceed 70%. But we've already done that for various reasons. What is important is to sit down through a framed and a structured dialogue. Yes.
How does informal trading, informal economy contribute to debt management?
Yes, this is a very important, issue that you have raised, and for sure, there's a lot of cash, there's a lot of money circulating in informal trading, and only if we formalize them so that they are able to pay taxes, the taxes that we need to finance processes that can make us pay debt. You tend to find that people are trading informally, and a lot of money is being lost to government, which is supposed to be mobilized to then support the budget, to then support efforts to pay our debt. So only if we formalize. Even in the mining sector, we have informal mining sector where people like artisanal miners, they are just mining, sell their gold or their produce at black market and circumventing the process of paying what is due to government. If that is done, then we have a clear roadmap, then we have a pool of funds that we can then use to support our debt repayment processes.
Having said that, is there adequate, education, advocacy towards, people understanding the importance of not circumventing, paying taxes in order for the government to actually have funds, to manage debt?
Yes, I think there is still a lot to be done by all stakeholders, like civil society, government, churches, to make sure that people pay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Even the Bible says that. So if I can't pay my taxes, how am I supposed to want social amenities? How am I supposed to want health services or a good road? So people must have a mindset shift. They must have a positive mental framing around taxation. And also to government, they also need to make sure that there's a balance in terms of taxation so that it do not become regressive and it choke people in terms of trying to raise money through that route.
You mentioned about the situation in SADC regarding the position of debt. Does it also affect the countries that we sometimes refer to as developed countries? Do they have debt?
Yes. The very few countries across the globe have no debt. America is got debt. Britain has got debt. Everywhere you go, whether developed countries and less developed countries, we all have debt. But the most important thing is that debt must be repaid, but repaid in a way that doesn't suffocate social services, ways that doesn't suffocate human rights, right to water, right to health, right to social safety nets, etc.
Yes. How about borrowing from the international organizations? Is the system fair to all countries, including developing countries, that they are able to repay without much asked from them?
Yeah, well, what I know is that those creditors, they want to make profit. And they know that developing countries are somewhat running economies that are not as good as developed countries. And if they give us debt, they really know we at some point will fail to pay. And they give us high interest so that they make a lot of what? A lot of profit. But I'm saying if we have obligations that we have done, let us make sure that each and every time, I'm happy Zimbabwe, each and every year is allocating some resources towards debt repayment. It's a good step in the right direction. We are going somewhere. Yeah.
Vivian Zama, who is a debt analyst. We are discussing debt management. That debt is important, but it has to be managed well, and also repayments have to be made. So join us in the third and final segment of Economic Forum. It is important that during the budgeting process, some allocation is also made in order to pay outstanding debts. Welcome back to Economic Forum, where we are discussing debt management with our debt analyst here, who is Vivian Zama. Now let's go on to the budgeting process that we have every year. How should Treasury look, at what to put aside for debt repayment?
Yeah, so in terms of the budget, this is a very, very, very important process that is starting. And let me encourage the citizens of Zimbabwe to go out there and voice their concerns and also contribute to the budget making process. I'm happy that year in, year out, it has been a people-driven budget. And I know Treasury has got an ear to listen to whatever we want. But when it comes to debt, it is another method that a country can employ in terms of repayment through the budget. But what is important is to make sure that the amount that is going to be allocated to debt repayment must not suffocate allocations that should be made to health, for example. We have not met the Abuja declaration of 15% allocated to health since time immemorial. It is because we also have a greater percentage of money going to debt repayment. Debt repayment must not also suffocate issues around education, provision of social services, and provision of social safety nets. Yes, it's good for the Treasury to allocate funds, and it's very noble for them to prioritize debt repayment, but there should be a balance. We should not suffer the quagmire of poverty. We should not cripple our economy to fail to respond to emergencies because we have allocated more funds to debt. We should make sure that this budget should try by all means to close the gap, the inequality gap that exists between the poor and the rich. We should make sure that the poor also afford to go to hospital and get medication. They should also afford making their kids go to school and also provide the necessary water, the necessary land, the necessary housing that is required by every individual.
But despite your plea, what ratio would you recommend that at least having taken care of these domestic issues, a certain percentage has to go towards debt repayment?
Yeah, percentage it can only make sense if we get to know how much we are looking at in terms of the overall budget. But of course, thumb sucking 0.5% should go to debt repayment, because you see that ministries like Ministry of Youth, Ministries of Women, they can get maybe even the Ministry of Social Service. If you get in the budget, they can get up to 2% or 3%. So it's impossible for us to then have 7% or 8% going to debt repayment and suffocate those very important ministries, those very important ministries that make sure our lives go forward. So I'm saying we might not be accurate in terms of percentage, but I'm saying a significant amount should go towards obligations that we have as a country in terms of rights, in terms of social service delivery, in terms of health, in terms of education.
Let's go on to your recommendations. I know you've already made some important points, especially encouraging people, to attend. But recommendations that can improve our debt management process.
Number one, I think we should continue with the structured dialogue. Zimbabwe is in the right direction, and as you know that we are leading the structured dialogue being led by His Excellency Joaquim Chissano. It's a good platform where stakeholders are brought together and map the way forward on how Zimbabwe is going to repay debt. Number 2, Parliament oversight.
A few more points about that. I think viewers may have seen former President Chisano, helping on that. What exactly is he helping with?
Yes, he's helping with mediating in terms of our lenders. He's helping in terms of setting the ground bare for us to have a dialogue between the lenders, the private sector, or whatever bilateral engagements and relationships that we have with our lenders, to create an environment where dialogue leads, to create a framework for debt repayment, without also suffocating what I have said before, the social services and whatever.
You can go on.
Yes. Number 2, Parliament oversight is very important in terms of making sure that the money borrowed is used for what it has been borrowed for. That oversight is very critical for me in terms of recommendations. Number 3, we need to fight corruption. We need to fight illicit financial flows. We need to empower our police. We need to empower our Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission. We need to empower every stakeholder that is in the anti-corruption value chain to stop leakages of resources in our country.
Well, that's Vivian Tashinga Zama. He's a debt analyst. He has been telling us everything to do with debt management, right from the definition of what it is and how it is managed, and that it is important, in many aspects. We cannot avoid it. And all you have to do is to thank you very much for coming to the program.
Thank you for having me.
If you would like to get in touch with us and ask some of the questions related to what we've been discussing here with Vivian Tashinga Zamba, you can do so on the numbers that are showing on your screen. If you'd like to engage with us and so that we can link you to the people that come to the program, you can do so on the social media platforms that again are showing on your screens. If you have missed some of the episodes of Economic Forum, you can actually watch them on our YouTube channel, which is Economic Forum Zimbabwe. So on behalf again of our guest, Vivian Tashinga Zamba, and the production crew, this is John Masugu wishing you happy viewing.